Having goals is important, especially when it comes to getting better at guitar. And each goal that you set for yourself needs to be like a stepping stone that leads you closer and closer to your ultimate goal, which is to reach your full potential as a guitarist. Now, I know that may sound like the loftiest goal of all, which it kind of is, but one thing I've noticed is that a lot of guitar players don't even know what that looks like to reaching their full potential. And I get it, maybe it's a little bit too deep, and all you really want to do is play guitar. So what I'm going to do in this video is just give you some pointers on what I think really sets you up for reaching your full potential. But as always, be sure to stick around till the very end of the lesson because I've got a free gift for you and your guitar. You're both going to love it. All right, so the first pointer I want to give you for reaching your full potential as a guitarist is this. All the pattern-based stuff that you learn early on, like chord shapes and scale patterns, you need to think of those as training wheels. Let me explain. So let's say you learn the A minor pentatonic pattern, right? The great thing about stuff like this is that they're very quickly rewarding. You know, you can learn how to play the A minor pentatonic scale relatively quickly and then, over time get good enough to play it to where you can comfortably navigate the scale, right? But when you're going up and down this pattern, it's just kind of helping your brain recognize, like if you want to play an A minor right here, this A minor pentatonic pattern, this is the place to be if you want to do that. Now here's what I mean by understanding that they're training wheels. I'm not talking about the scale itself, I'm just talking about patterns in general. These are just things to really get your brain recognizing the fretboard because the human mind loves patterns, and so when we lay out all these patterns on the fretboard, it's great because you can learn quickly how to play, let's say the A minor pentatonic in like all 5 different positions because they each got their own pattern. But here's the thing. So many guitar players will learn all 5 pentatonic positions, but they still don't know how to create a lick of music with it. And that's not the problem of the scale as much as it is just learning the patterns and then leaving it at that. That's what I mean by their training wheels. The pattern is something you learn in the beginning, but once you get past that point of understanding the patterns, you got them under your fingers, you got to learn how to actually use the scale to create, right? To create music, licks, phrases, whatever it is, like just letting that inner musician actually say something, right? So it's not going to be patterns that teach you how to do that per se. So even though the patterns give you quick wins, which they do, I teach a lot of lessons where if you want to kind of bypass the theory stuff and just get straight into learning how to solo, I can teach you how to solo with just, just with that little box in the pentatonic scale. And you can stay on it for a while and really enjoy yourself, but obviously you're going to need to move on, you're going to need to grow and expand upon what you learn. So you're going to have to shed this whole thing of, I have this 4-note box, I don't know anything about the notes, I just know that I can wiggle the strings a little bit and then manipulate them in a certain way to actually sound cool. That's all I know, but I don't really understand the context of how to actually use it. And once you want to actually start learning the musical context behind the patterns that you know, that's when you can kind of shed the whole pattern-based understanding of things and being like, I know how to play the pattern and I'm good at it, but I don't want it to be a crutch. I want to be able to actually play music without thinking about what scale I'm in. I'm just thinking in terms of like melody, let's say. And one thing that'll help you thinking more in terms of the actual music is to understand kind of the how and the why behind the function of something like a pattern. Let's take, for example, the A minor pentatonic scale, right? Not even the whole scale pattern like this. Let's just take the actual pentatonic scale, which is 5 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just take a look at those. Now each note has a name. You got your first note, which is the root note, which is A, right? So if we're in the key of A minor or playing an A minor pentatonic, our root note would be A, right? So we have A, and then we have a flat third or minor third, that's a C note, right? I'll explain what all this means in just a second. We got our 4th, which is D, our 5th, which is E, and our flat 7 or minor 7th, which is G. So we have A, right, root note, C, which is our flat third or minor third. We have D, which is our perfect 4th, E, which is our perfect 5th, and then G, which is our flat 7 or minor 7th. Those are like the scale degrees and the actual names of the notes themselves. Now, if you want to know how I knew like which note was the flat 3 and which one's the flat 7, the 4th, the 5th, all that stuff, which if that just sounds like Greek to you right now, it won't for long, I promise, because I'm going to explain to you exactly how I figured that out. Which leads me to the second pointer on reaching your full potential as a guitarist, is knowing how to make music theory work for you. Music theory is an extremely useful tool, and we love music theory at Guitar Mastery Method. I know we do a ton of lessons where it's like, no theory this, skip the theory that. This is just if we're putting out a lesson that's like, hey, you want a quick win, something that will bypass all the academic stuff and just get you straight to playing, we got you covered, you know? But that doesn't mean we don't like music theory. We have plenty of lessons where we talk about the theory stuff as well. But my philosophy with music theory has always been about practicality, making it work for you, right? You don't need to have to ingest, you know, books and just like reams and reams of text of music theory to understand how to make music. It just comes down to understanding how to use music theory, okay? Because you can't use all music theory all at once, right? It's just a foundation that you want to have. So going back to the A minor pentatonic scale, okay? How I knew what each of the scale degrees are, it comes down to understanding the major scale. If there's any scale that you really want to understand, it's the major scale. The major scale is called the major scale for a reason. It is the major scale, right? Everything is based off of it. So if we were to take the A major scale, for example, right? Right, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We have 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then our octave, right? The 8th note, you know, we don't need to count because we already have that same exact note. That's the root note. So each of those notes has a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or root, or first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th. It's literally that simple. Every note has a number. Now, if we were to adapt this to the A minor pentatonic, it's not 7 notes, it's 5, penta, 5, whereas the major scale is diatonic. Diatonic is a 7-note scale. So we have the root note, right? That matches with the A major pentatonic, or sorry, the A major scale and the A minor pentatonic. They share that root note, duh, right? Because that's the root note, A. Now, this next note, C, is a flat third. So what does that mean? That means if we took the third of the major scale, 1, 2, 3, that's the third, which is C sharp, and we flattened it, that would make it C, but we play it over here, we now have, so it's the same note, right? C and C. We now have a flat third, and that flat third typically signals a minor tonality, right? Whereas a major third, right, is more like happy sounding, whereas minor third, if we're to, you know, think about how it sounds in context with the root note, different tonality, right? This is a big difference from this, right? So we've gone from major third to minor third, and we flattened it. So hence flat third. And that's why flat third and minor third are synonymous, right? So if I say minor third, if you hear someone say minor third, they also mean flat third, right? It's like the same, it's the same thing. So we got that, okay? And then we have our 4th and 5th. These are called perfect intervals. Now, if I were to look for the 4th and 5th, it's not flat or sharp, right? I would look for it with the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aha! They're contained within the A major scale. So they're shared between the A major scale and the A minor pentatonic. So there's no changes made to the 4th and 5th. So they stay the same. And the reason why they're called perfect intervals is because the way that their frequencies clash is a lot more pleasing to the ears and less, it creates a little bit less tension than the other scale degrees. So they tend to be known as perfect intervals. And if you think about it, what's the most popular chord progression ever written? A 1-4-5, right? We're using a 1 chord based on the root note, and a 4 chord based on the 4th scale degree, right? And a 5 chord based on the 5th scale degree. There's a reason why that progression is so perfect, right? These are the perfect intervals. So we have our root, right? Our flat third or minor third, our perfect 4th, perfect 5th. We got just one more note, the flat 7 or minor 7. Now, finding out this is the same way like we found out the flat third. We find the 7th note in the major scale. We always got to revert back to use the major scale as our reference point, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This note right here, G sharp, okay? That is our 7th, but it's a major 7, right? So we want to flatten it to make it minor. So we go, and wouldn't you know it, that 5th fret, once we flatten it, it's the 5th fret of the D string. That is the 5th note of the pentatonic scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is that flat 7, okay? So if we were to take the 7th from the major scale, like I just did, and then flatten it, we now have the flat 7. So there we go, root, flat third, fifth, or sorry, fourth, fifth, flat seven. So if, let's say, we wanted to learn the blues minor pentatonic scale, which is literally the minor pentatonic scale, but we're gonna add a flat fifth. How do we find that? Well, do we know where the fifth is? I think so. Root, flat third, fourth, fifth. Aha, there's the fifth. Now, if I want to play a flat fifth, what do I got to do? Flatten it, go down one fret. We got ourselves a flat fifth here. So we now have root, for the blues minor pentatonic, we have root, flat third, fourth, flat fifth, fifth, flat seventh. All these flat notes, right? Which is part of what give it that bluesy sound. See, so just by figuring out context, the musical context of things, we were able to figure out together, right, how the flat five works. Once we figured out that we just have the major scale to refer to, we find the numbered notes, the scale degrees, right, each note, and we either flatten or sharpen it to accommodate to a brand new scale. Oh, and real quick, if you're getting value out of this lesson, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. It really helps us out and it lets us know that you want to see more lessons just like this one, which we'd be more than happy to give you. So thanks in advance, and let's get right back to it. So continuing on with the minor pentatonic, here's another thing that I get asked quite a bit from a ton of guitar players is, if blues is in a major key, which it often is, but we'll talk about sort of the nuance of that, why is the minor pentatonic scale used? It's a great question, and I'll tell you the reason why. So for one, it does kind of break the rules a bit, which blues is all about. It's all about breaking rules, right? It was the progenitor of rock and roll. Right? It's like the blues had that vibe, that soul to it, but how does that work over an A major, right? Or if we're really accentuating that major third, because if you think about, like, let's take like an A7 bar chord, for example. And this is what I'm going to mention here, why the minor pentatonic works really well over a blues. It's because typically you use seventh chords when you're playing the blues, right? Or dominant chords. Now, what is a seventh chord? It's basically a major chord, but with a flat seven. So instead of playing the octave, like for example, we did like an A bar chord, right? And we wanted to make it an A7 bar chord. All we got to do is remove our pinky here. And then our first finger is now going to be barring on the fifth fret of that D string. And we now have a flat seven in there. So this chord, what gives it its bluesy, kind of tense but cool sound is the fact that we have a flat seven and a major third. Ooh. Very, very distinct when you combine those notes, right? You have a root, and then you have the flat seven and the major third. Kind of bizarre sounding on its own, but get this. Now, what scale is a flat seven? Could it be the A minor pentatonic scale that we just broke down, including the blues scale, which is the same thing, just with an added flat fifth? Yes! We have a flat seven in the A minor pentatonic scale. Now, if you're playing over a blues, you have that clashing tonality between the flat seven and the major third. Gives it that sound, but you can go. You can add all that stuff and kind of break the rules a bit, and it still works. This is why the minor pentatonic scale works over a blues. Because in a seventh chord, you got that flat seven, which kind of like lays out the red carpet. I use that analogy a lot, but that's really what it does, is it just kind of invites you in to play minor pentatonic tonalities, even though you have that obvious major with that major third. That's why you can do something like this. So it works. Nothing that I played, you know, it didn't, I mean, hopefully it sounded okay enough to at least register as like, yeah, that sounds like the blues, right? Because we're playing with a dominant seventh chord, right? Got that flat seven, that third in there. And I was just really milking that that minor pentatonic tonality to show you that it just worked. And that's why it works. That's the how and the why. We've now taken a look, underneath the veil of like how all of this works. And that musical context is what helps usher in that full potential as a guitar player, is just being able to understand things on that level. And it really just boils down to the major scale. Just with those first 2 pointers, by the way, that really sets a foundation for you. And it goes beyond just the minor pentatonic scale. I'm talking any scale you could possibly imagine that's derived from the major scale, which is most scales you will ever find yourself ever using playing Western music, right? You're not gonna have to worry about venturing outside of that unless you want to get into like really high concept like jazz stuff. But if you're just going to be playing straight over like, the chord progressions that we hear in the music that we love, you don't have to look past the major scale. Just let that be your benchmark for everything that you figure out. Now, the first 2 pointers I gave you were powerful enough. Like I said, they laid the foundation for you being able to understand the musical context of things. So that's what really helps you reach your full potential. But one more thing that I want to tell you is this. Understand that the learning is never going to stop. Ever. And it doesn't matter if you go on to become a professor of music at Berkeley or something, or Juilliard or Belmont here in Nashville. You're never, ever, ever going to stop learning. And that's the beauty. You never want to stop learning. You're never going to reach a point where you're like, I know it all now, therefore I am bored, right? Right? I mean, it just would be boring if you knew everything. Now, I know you could probably look at guitar players like Guthrie Govan, for example, who, I feel like he's got to be one of the best guitar players alive, just in the sense that he can play literally anything, and he plays it like it's the only thing that he knows how to play. He's really got a savant level of understanding of music. He's very poetic and eloquent in the way that he speaks. And it's just the way that he plays as well. It's just incredible. He is an awe-inspiring human being, musician, and guitar player. But I would be remiss if I thought that he goes around thinking, I know everything there is to know about music. I can almost guarantee you he does not think that way. So just understand that the learning never stops. And the great thing about that is it takes a lot of pressure off of you. There's always going to be more to learn. There's always potential, right? We're talking about potential here. There's always more potential to be inspired. And inspiration does come from knowledge, but it also comes from experience. That's why, taking everything that I've shared with you here today and just applying it out in your life and in what you do musically, you're going to find so much inspiration along the way, and that's really what's going to keep you going. That's going to be the wind beneath your wings as you're improving and, like I mentioned, like all those goals that you set for yourself, getting closer and closer and closer to reaching your full potential. And that's the thing, is that your full potential is something that you may not actually realize in your lifetime, but you're always going to be on that path where the learning never stops and you're always getting better. So to recap, to lay the foundation for reaching your full potential as a guitarist is this. All of the pattern-based stuff that you learn is great for quick wins and getting a feel for the fretboard, but you want to think of it like training wheels. You're eventually going to shed them off once you learn about the mechanics of how all that stuff actually works. And then as you're learning all of that, all the musical context and more of the theory-based stuff, you want to make it work for you in a practical way. And finally, remember, the learning never stops. So get comfortable with the fact that you're always going to be learning. And now that you know this stuff, you can think of it like a filter. So when you go off and absorb new information and new knowledge about playing guitar, you're going to have this filter that's going to help you understand how to get the most use out of everything that you learn. And that's what's going to keep you on the path of reaching your full potential as a guitarist. And speaking of new information that you're going to absorb, I got just the thing for you that's going to get you kick-started on your path of reaching your full potential. And it just so happens to involve that free gift I owe you. And now that you've made it to the end of the lesson, I got to make good on my promise and present it henceforth. This right here is your free lesson on how to instantly solo in any key. This lesson has a healthy balance of pattern recognition and actual context-based understanding of music to be able to learn every key on your fretboard and how to solo in them. And you're going to be able to go from 0 to 100 on doing that in record time, believe me. Just be sure to click here to claim your copy or check the link in the description box. It's important to always keep your eyes on the prize when learning guitar. And the amount of information out there can be overwhelming. But understand, you don't need all of that information to reach your full potential. Just enough to give you what you need to be the best guitar player you see yourself as.